Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Patrick King here, and this is episode number 3 of our new Talking About Horses live audio broadcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today I'm very excited to have here as a guest with me my good friend Wendy Murdoch. Wendy, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, it's great to join you, Patrick.
Awesome. So, Wendy, for the, 3 or 4 people out there in the horse world that have not heard of you or don't know who Wendy Murdoch is, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I've been teaching and I've been a clinician for over 30 years. I apprenticed with Sally Swift in 1992. I was her last full-time apprentice. I have a master's degree in equine reproductive physiology, that's horse hormones, and so I have a very scientific approach to things. I want to know why it works, how it works, and understand it from a physical perspective, a scientific perspective, not just take somebody's word for it that this is the way something is. So I've always been the one that's kind of like, when somebody tells me something, I want to know, well, you know, what's the science behind that, or how does that work? Or I'll go back and research it and look it up. And so that's kind of what I've always brought to it is the real, it's not smoke and mirrors. This is the real nuts and bolts. You got to deal with gravity, and how does it work?
That's awesome. And that's, it's funny because I talk about you, and that's kind of how I talk about you to a lot of folks. I refer to you as a kind of a scientist that is involved with horses, that, like you said, that scientific approach, that scientific perspective. It's not, oh, he said this might work, she said this might work, history said this is tradition. And I tell people all the time, I'm pretty, what's the word I want to use? Skeptical. I'm pretty skeptical about a lot of things, and I say, there's very few people that I think I know more skeptical than me, and I would say that you're one of them. So, like with things like Surefoot, I tell people, and we'll talk about your Surefoot in maybe another broadcast, but I tell people when I'm talking about Surefoot, I say, it kind of sounded like baloney to me, but Wendy's the only person I know more skeptical than I am. So if she says there's something to it, there's got to be something to it.
Yeah, and I'm working all the time on finding out what is to it. And actually, I'm going to meet with Bob Bowker on August 1st. He's the guy at MSU that's been studying the hoof, and he's like the barefoot people's guru on feet.
Okay.
So I'm actually going to get a chance to sit down and talk with him. But he's been doing a lot of research, and there's got to be some science behind it. We just have to dig, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
So I'm still working on that answer. Don't worry.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that is so much what I love about you, Wendy, and working with you and the opportunities that we've had to do that together is that there's so much of a real basis behind it, rather than just, like you said, it's smoke and mirrors, it's reality, and it either works or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, why? Or if it does, why? And I've always gotten a lot out of our time together because of that. So I love that. So again, thanks for coming on here with us. So the topic today, we said we wanted to talk about why it's important for the riders to pay attention to their position. I really love this. We talk a lot in my clinics about the rider's seat and about equitation and things like that. So when you're talking about a rider's position, are you referring to equitation in this?
We can call it equitation because that's basically the definition. I think of equitation as the rider's use of the body. So,
okay.
I'd have to really look up the real definition of, to have the really specific definition of the word. But to me, and I used to equitate when I was a kid, and I would take the equitation classes, and it was all about rider position and function. How well do you apply your aids, and your horse respond to those aids. So sure, you could call it equitation.
Okay.
There's a program called Equitation Science that's come out of Australia, and it's more about behavior modification and training. And I've always wondered why they use the word equitation instead of equestrian, and I'm still trying to sort that out.
Interesting.
But anyway, so, to me, equitation is the use of the rider's body and the aids in terms of communicating to the horse.
Gotcha. Okay, so equitation then is sort of the sum total of then the position and how we use our position. Is that what you'd say?
For me, yeah,
Okay.
that would be my definition. I can always go and look up. I don't know if I can look up in my favorite book. I have a favorite book. It's called Understanding Equitation by Jean Saint-Fort Paillard. And this guy he's no longer alive, a Frenchman who was in the Olympics. And, he titled his book Understanding Equitation, and it's all about the use of the rider's aid. So
Okay.
He's the only guy that has explained the role of the rider's lower back in, I think better than anyone could. I just have read his definition at many clinics because he explains it so beautifully, and I so believe in exactly how he refers to it. So if anybody wants a really good definition of the role of the rider's lower back, this is a great book, and I can list it up on my website so people you can only find
That's awesome. That'd be fantastic, and I'd love to share that with our folks here also. Can you tell us again the name of the book?
It's called Understanding Equitation by Jean Saint-Fort Paillard. And
Awesome.
It's like I said, it's only in used copies, or it's out of print, but there's plenty of copies floating around, and I will just I'll put that up at the end.
Fantastic. Perfect. I know I'm going to be looking for that book if we don't have it in our library already at this point. We're kind of in the middle of the move, so the library is taking up most of a storage unit.
And how many library books do you have in your horse library?
It's quite a bit. It's quite a bit. I built in our
Is it
last home in
450?
Ohio. I built an in-wall bookshelf, and we filled the whole wall. So
Okay, so I have 450.
I'm jealous. I'm pretty sure you beat me. Damn.
I'm pretty sure that's what I have last I checked, but I have some duplicate copies, so maybe you'll inherit some things.
Gotcha. We're going to have to compare notes at some point on books. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So very
I have
cool.
to figure out where it goes. I got to find somebody who's going to carry it forward after I'm gone.
There we go. Awesome. Okay, so then as a rider, Wendy, why is it important for us to be aware of our position?
Well, what I always tell people is gravity is not discipline specific. So we live in gravity, right? We live in gravity. We're born in gravity. Everything in the known world is affected by gravity.
Right, and it's no longer just a theory, right? We've proven that stuff.
It's not a theory. Apples fall to the ground, riders fall to the ground. And there isn't anybody that I've met on this planet that can avoid it unless they go up into outer space. And the biggest problem with going to outer space and long-term space travel is that when you're not in gravity, your bones start to dissolve and your muscles dwindle because you don't need them.
Right.
And so, like these people coming back from the space station, there was a photo the last time they showed some guys coming back, and they were in these little cocoon-like baby cradles because they couldn't stand up, right? Because they've been in space too long. So, everything comes back to the fact that because of gravity, we ride. There'd be no reason to ride without gravity because we would just bounce, and jumping would be sort of irrelevant, right? We wouldn't want to sit on a horse to jump. I think jumping so that we feel that release from gravity for that split second, that thrill of trying to escape gravity, and the fact that we come back down.
Right.
So hopefully on our horse.
Exactly, right? Some of us sooner and less planned, but we always come back down.
We always come back down. So because of gravity and its effects on us, and whether it's sitting on a horse or just sitting at your computer or aging in general, we are subject to gravity. And if we use ourselves in a good way, we minimize the gravitational effects and we maximize our potential. So, I always tell people one of my favorite things to go watch is Cirque du Soleil, because those performers they appear to defy gravity. And that's because they use gravity so effectively that they can do incredible things. So they're using their body in that gravitational space to appear to defy it, or do things like tight wire, high wire and tightrope and, all the trapeze things. And we love it. We love watching people defy gravity. So that's the thing is, if we use ourselves in a good way, then we can function efficiently. It's less stress on us. And we have to remember that horse is subject to the effects of gravity all the time. And the minute we sit on his back, we are now either a help to that horse in gravity or a hindrance to that horse.
Right.
So, if we use our aids in our body, if we equitate in a good way, then we can aid the horse in using his body really effectively to carry us. And that's the bottom line when riding, is it's not just a question of that the horse is, just carrying himself. He has to carry the rider. And there's an efficient way to do that and an inefficient way. So I talk about the horse's weight-bearing posture as opposed to just his general posture in the field. When the horse walks to the water tank or goes to eat some grass, he's not carrying himself in the way he needs to bear weight effectively. And this is where, when people talk about that it's natural, it's really not natural for the horse to carry the rider effectively.
Right.
And that's the bottom line key here that we have to look at is if we want to minimize our impact on the horse and minimize any damage that we could cause by asking him to bear weight and do crazy things that we ask them to do, they need to use their body in a very efficient way. And that weight-bearing posture, it requires that the horse engage the sling mechanism, the thoracic sling in the front end, to lift the rib cage between the pillars of the front leg, because they don't have a collarbone like we do.
Right, exactly.
So this weight-bearing posture, a lot of people don't necessarily understand it or recognize it, but they need to be able to lift that rib cage between the pillars of the front leg to minimize the pressure on the front feet. If they drop the withers, we've just dramatically increased the pressure on the front feet, essentially overloaded them, put the horse on the forehand, and then we can start causing damage because there's too much strain on those feet and legs.
Yes.
And so and that's the thing is, to what degree do we need the horse in weight-bearing posture? That's going to depend on the task that we're asking them to do. If we're asking them to jump, 6-foot jumps, we really should be training them to carry themselves really, really well to minimize the impact. Because when you think about the landing side, if that rib cage and that rider's weight is dropping down as that horse lands, we're really loading those front legs. We're really pounding them into the ground.
Right, absolutely. So this weight-bearing posture, it's sounding to me like we're talking about really self-carriage with the rider. Is that right?
Yes, right. And again, there's stages of that and degrees of that. And this is where we come to one of the terms that I see currently most poorly understood, and that's collection.
Yes.
Because people have been falsely led to believe that if the horse yields to the bit, they are headed toward collection. And that is, in my opinion, a false impression because we're just going for a headset there. We're not looking at the entire physical system and what it has to do to bear weight into collection, which has a much more sophisticated and greater series of requirements in order for the horse to do that. I mean, it's not just, a lot of people think, oh, well, my horse yields his jaw, I'm going to be collected. It's like, nope.
Right.
That is one tiny little piece of this big picture. And in many ways, it can be counterproductive if you get the horse to what I call allergic to the bit and dropping away from it.
Yes, and so I was just going to ask you that. I'm really glad to hear you say that. So when we talk about a horse yielding their jaw, or what we see a lot now in the horsemanship clinics and the natural horsemanship idea and things like that, riders talk a lot about having a soft feel. And I kind of feel like I see a lot of this soft feel idea actually taking the horse down the wrong path because of, like you said, kind of the allergic reaction to the bit. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, because, I have one of my very dear friends and whom I got 2 horses from. His name is Bruce Olson, and he's a guy sitting down in Richmond, Virginia. He's basically a musician, but he spent his childhood growing up at Jack Brainerd's ranch. And he did reining, and he's an amazing rider because he's quintidextrous. He's a drummer who can sing, so he can do 5 different things at the same time.
Wow.
And yeah, he's a really cool guy. I hope you get to meet him. But Bruce would talk about the outer mouth and the inner mouth. And unfortunately, what's happening in what I see today is we're only getting to the outer mouth, and we get it to such an extreme that we never get to what's called the inner mouth. So the outer mouth is the horse that yields he's yielding. If you take the rein, he's going to do what we call a soft heel. He's going to yield to the bit. He's going to drop off the bit. The problem is if the horse keeps dropping off the bit, he is never on the bit. You can't ever get him truly through and truly on the aids because he keeps evading the bit by dropping his jaw. And so this is where I'm going to take you to task a little bit, because I'm pretty sure you had something about nosebands one day.
I'm sure, yep.
And so, I really am a believer of the middle. I always tell people, where's the middle? And I wrote an article for Eclectic Horseman magazine. If your readers don't get Eclectic Horseman magazine, they might want to consider subscribing. It's a great rag. I write for it. I wrote one of my favorite articles, which is called Where's the Middle? It came out, I can't tell you what issue, but the purpose of the noseband is not to, in my opinion, crank the jaw shut, but it's to limit the jaw and how much it can open. In other words, properly adjusted, 2 fingers underneath the jaw, one on top of the other stacked, so that you can get between the noseband and the horse's jaw. So if the horse opens his mouth, it is limited. Without a noseband, if the horse, and you go for the soft heel, and he drops his jaw, all that time he's dropping his jaw and gaping his mouth, you are not getting to his feet.
Yes.
So what are you teaching him? And so this is where we really got to think about where's the middle. The function of a noseband, and by the way, a Bozell, a horse cannot yawn in, therefore it is a noseband. But the function of the noseband is to limit, not to slam shut. And so if the horse keeps gaping the mouth, then what he's learning from the bit pressure is to evade the bit. And now we'll never get the horse on the bit because he just evades it.
Right.
And so that's where Bruce talks about the outer mouth and the inner mouth. The outer mouth being that, you pick up the reins and the horse doesn't brace against the bit, right? He yields to it. The inner mouth is the relaxation of the tongue resting on the bit so that all of the musculature is relaxed and in tone with the function. You have to realize that, muscles require tone to do a function. So you have tension, tone, and lack of tone, flaccid, right?
Okay.
So you need this tongue to be relaxed in the horse's mouth. So because of the deep connections that the hyoid system has. So now I've introduced this other whole new thing, all right? The hyoid bone is a series of bones that's up inside the jaw. People and horses have it. The tongue muscle attaches to the tab at the end. It looks kind of like a wishbone in people. Mm-hmm. There are over 20 muscles attached to the hyoid bone. There's one muscle that goes from the hyoid to the inside of the shoulder and one that goes from the hyoid to the sternum. Any tension in the back is going to result in mouth tension. Any tension in the mouth is going to result in back tension due to this connection.
Yes.
So a lot of times people think they have a mouth problem, and really what they have is a back problem. And the horse is just expressing that problem in the mouth because that's the visible place, but that's not the cause. And since this is so critical to weight-bearing posture, the ability of the horse to lift the rib cage between the pillars of the front leg so that the neck lengthens and the horse comes more into a vertical frame, this whole piece is super, super important. That we need the horse to meet the bit in a relaxed way with a relaxed tongue. And if that doesn't happen, we don't have that inner mouth. we only have the outer mouth where the horse evades the bit.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I hope I haven't lost your listeners. I don't know if there's any questions that anybody's been putting up there. I don't want to get too deep. But,
right, no, it's, to me, it's deep, but it's the kind of deep that we need to go, I tell riders all the time, I don't want to make this sound more complicated than it is, but sometimes it's a little more complicated than it is,
we've been led down this garden path of, you got to get the horse to yield to the bit, but if you overdo that, you will create yet another problem.
Yes,
and so
exactly.
This is what I always tell my students will say, I'll talk about a particular saddle and they'll go, oh, you don't like blah, blah saddle. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's not that I don't like something. It's that I always say you need to know your poison so that you know the antidote. If you know that this particular brand of saddle has this particular problem that you see consistently in that brand, then you will know to look for that. And if it's minimal in that particular saddle that you're looking at, you might be okay.
Yes.
But if you don't know that this particular brand always has consistently this problem in their manufacturing, you're going to think everything's wonderful, and yet you may have a problem.
Right.
So that's where I say, if it's like, I'm always looking for the middle, and I don't want the horse braced against the bit, but I don't want the horse dropping his jaw off the bit. I really want to find the middle place, and that teaching the horse to yield to the bit should be a momentary phase in their education to make sure they're not bracing. But if we keep going there without the rest of the function behind it, we cause a major problem because we'll never get the horse really on the aids, really in front of our leg, responding to our hands, responding to our feet, and in weight-bearing posture, which is so necessary for their good health.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought up the hyoid, because it's something that I talk a lot about now whenever I teach my in-hand classes. So I call it a groundwork class where we focus on the horse's mind first, and then we have an in-hand class where we focus on the mind and the body kind of coming together. And a huge piece of it is on really relaxing the jaw and getting to what sounds like Bruce is referring to as the inner mouth. And I recently had the opportunity to play around excavating a horse who had been put down not too long ago. And in the excavation, we found the whole hyoid.
Oh, you did? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, it's called exhumed when you dig up a dead body, as opposed to excavate, which is for a building.
There we go. Well, there we go. Perfect. Okay. So we exhumed then this horse, and the hyoid was intact.
Wow.
As was actually the epiglottis, which tells me we got there kind of soon.
I was going to say, you got there pretty early.
Yes. So it was fascinating to me because I've seen a lot of diagrams of the hyoid, but I think I've only ever seen one actual photo of the hyoid. And it was amazing to me because I've known about the connections to the tongue and all that. But to see the connection not only to the tongue, but also to the roof of the mouth up there with the two side bones, and I can't right now offhand remember what they were called, but to see the entire connection to the top and the bottom coming through that hyoid apparatus was really just kind of a neat moment there. A lot of light bulbs in that moment,
Yeah, when you realize, and like I said, this is in people and horses, so we also have a hyoid that's as important.
Right.
In terms of our body function.
Right.
It's really cool. That's awesome. I think, and again, I'm going to, while we're talking, I'm, of course, going through my photos. I'm pretty sure I have a picture of the hyoid on a skeletal prep that I photographed years ago, but I'm going to have to dig. So I'll make a note because maybe I can put up a picture.
That's awesome. And I took, and we're treating and curing right now basically everything from the first thoracic vertebra forward, including the shoulder, so that we can use that. I've been using a skull a lot now in my bridling lectures and in a lot of the general clinics that I'm giving, so folks can kind of see what's underneath what they're working on. So
Right.
they're working a little deeper than just on the surface, you know. So I'm pretty excited to have that whole deal on hand now. So anyway, I think you and I could nerd out about this stuff all night long. Again, this is why I love whenever we get the chance to chat together, because there's so much that accidentally comes up that is just amazing. So when we're talking then about the rider position, I know we're going to have, or I would imagine we're going to have some potential pushback from some riders saying, yeah, well, I'm a jumper, or I'm a ranch rider, or I'm a trail rider. And so what we're saying is that the rider's position, and I love how you said it, gravity is not discipline specific. So this position is important regardless of what type of horse or what type of tack or what type of costume we have on or what we're doing. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, the way to think about it is, if you've ever had a really favorite pair of shoes and you finally had to kind of retire them and you got a new pair of shoes, and then about a month later you put those old shoes back on and you realize how warped they are. Well, yeah, that's what your horse is feeling all the time, right? And so they're going to have to model to you in order to carry you, because they can't, you know, they're malleable, and what horses do is compensate. And so for the issues that you have, they're going to have to compensate. Now, that doesn't mean that we should quit riding because we've had injuries. It just means that we need to do our part of being responsible, that's able to respond, but be responsible to our horses to do our best and to keep learning about how we use our body. Because they're the ones who suffer for us. They're going to turn into that pair of shoes that's warped if we keep ignoring our issues. Yeah. And just, you know, making them have to.
That's a great analogy. I love that. Yeah. So with our horse now being a warped shoe, what are some of the things that you're seeing as kind of the biggest or maybe the most common rider problems that you encounter?
The misunderstanding of what heels down is perhaps the biggest, if you will, fault that I see in rider position today, because you have to realize everything's going to start from that foot. You know, you might think I'm obsessed with feet and ground, but you know, with Surefoot and everything, and how I put like people on the pads, like I did with you at Equine Affair,
yes,
in Ohio. But you know. We have to make contact with the earth. We have to make contact with the ground, and we have to organize our body in relation to the ground. So when we're on the horse, the ground is the stirrup. And if we jam our foot against the stirrup and brace against it, that's going to affect us all the way through the entire system.
Yes.
So the misunderstanding of the foot, and then what sit up, quote unquote, means. Because what most people do when they hear the term sit up is they throw their chest back, which hollows out their lower back and creates a myriad of issues. I mean, I can't tell you, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I put my hands on somebody on a horse, and I get them to lengthen their back and soften their belly and fold so their rib cage is over their pelvis, and just to a person, they tell me they feel slumpy, it feels wrong, yes, it doesn't feel right, and yet the horses prove me out time and time and time again, because they're the ones who have to deal with whatever we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So regardless of what we perceive as correct, we have to look at our horses and let them tell us where they can function best. And in the end, good function looks great, but we are so unaccustomed to where that is, that place where we can really maximize our body and use it efficiently and in relation to the horse's movement, because we've all been, you know, screamed at, heels down, sit up, chest out, shoulders back, and not understood what is the intent, what are we trying to get to. What we're trying to get to is good use of our body so our horse can respond, you know, so that they can be responsible to us and we can be responsible to them.
So in following along that train of thought, and maybe I should have taken a little more time to frame my question, but do you feel like a big piece of this improper position, or this less than ideal position, or whatever we want to call it, is kind of the result of trying to mimic riders that, a rider trying to mimic other riders that they see that are more in kind of the fashion show idea? Because I think a lot of what we see, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of what I think we're seeing in our competitive disciplines now is just so much of a fad, of sitting in one way, riding in one way, moving a horse in a specific way, and all of those things I think are challenging the riders to mimic that. Is that something you notice?
It's actually deeper than that, unfortunately.
Okay, do tell.
And because I am of a generation that remembers what it was like back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And when I was a kid, I would go to Oxford Hunt Club Horse Show, and I would watch all the hunter jumper riders and the top show jumping riders. I watched Bill Steinkraus and Ronnie Much, and Victor Hugo Vidal was teaching, and George Morris he was just starting to become a professional, and Kathy Kusner and all these greats. And they were all basically trained by Bert Dynamothy. And Bert Dynamothy was a Hungarian cavalry officer who came to this country, and he trained our Olympic team, and they all trained together. They would go down to Gladstone, and they all trained as a team, and they were true amateurs too. I mean, like Bill Steinkraus is a true amateur, and they worked on the fundamentals. They were put on lunge lines. But if you ever get a copy, I think it's actually finally back in print, of Bert Dynamothy's book, The Dynamothy Method, and you look at the photograph of this man sitting on his horse, he has a perfectly flat back and a level foot.
Yes.
And that is his ideal rider position. It's what I teach. What happened, and you can look at, on Facebook, there's a great website called Back in the Day. I think it's Equestrian Back in the Day.
Yeah. I've seen that, yes.
It's fabulous because they put up all these old photos. And if you look at the photos, I can actually look at the photos and tell you what decade that person learned to ride. If you look at the photos, you'll see the function of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and toward the end of the 70s, and then absolutely 80s and forward, it changed. And it changed for a couple of reasons. One, we no longer had a cavalry. So we no longer had the military influence, good, bad, or otherwise, the military influence on what was correct position. Two, money. Money came into the sport. It became a pleasure sport. It became a hobby sport. And there was a lot of people, who wanted to get into the showing and all the social aspects and everything. And so we moved from a military-based function to a style where the color of the lining of your coat mattered whether or not you pinned.
Right.
And then the level of education significantly dropped because now people were going in and starting to teach that really didn't have the basis of education. And then we shifted to the crest release, where people started parking their hands on the horse's neck instead of being taught what's called a following hand.
Right.
And so the minute we lost the following hand, which required balance as opposed to resting on the horse's neck, the rider position just basically went to hell.
So we switched from riding into perching.
Yeah, I mean, once you park the hands and stop teaching on a following hand, which in my day, a following hand meant that you had a straight line from elbow to bit and you followed that horse's mouth. It was a very sophisticated aid because you could turn your horse over the jump. And so to learn how to do a following hand, there was no crest release. It did not exist in my generation when I was taught. It did not exist till like the late 70s and 80s. And so you were basically taught in grids. I mean, I can remember going through grid after grid after grid, and you would go through them without hands. You know, you'd tie your reins in a knot and go through a grid, and you found your balance. And so, you know, you weren't allowed to rest on the horse's neck. You weren't allowed to hang on his mouth. And then when you had the reins, because you already had the balance and the position, you could simply follow the horse's mouth because you didn't need the horse's mouth and you didn't need your hands. And this is, you know, in my jumping book, the one thing that I talk about in my jumping book is exactly that. I think it's at the back of the book. But, you know, what happened is that we lost this functional position and we went to a style, and you know, people are terrified to jump 3 foot nowadays. They have all these little tiny jumping classes of poles on the ground because you know, because people can't jump because they're not being taught a functional position. And the problem is that as we get further and further away from it, there are fewer and fewer people who know what it is and know how to teach it. And so we're losing that information. It's still out there. I mean, I have the pre-World War II Fort Riley cavalry training tapes in my library, and show the, you know, the stuff. It's great. It's like a black and white Western film. It's so beautifully scripted. And they freeze frame it, and they draw the lines, and they send Smith over the jumps, and here's Smith. You show them how to go down the bank. It's great. I love it. I'll show it to you sometime.
That's very cool.
Yeah, but that's what happened is we went from function to fad, and we haven't really gotten back. And it's just like, you know, it's the English version of the yielding the jaw with the soft feel thing, is that it's gotten so carried away that we've lost the original intent, which was just, I mean, I'll have students put their hands on the horse's neck for a brief moment in time in their learning process to figure out how to get their hips back and not brace against their stirrups, but to allow their joints to absorb. And then I take the reins away and run them through grids. And I will, you know, if I ever get to write my second jumping book, it's all the grid exercises that I set up when I go and teach a pony club clinic that they've got to get through, and if they can't get through, they don't get their reins back.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic.
You know? But once you can do all those exercises, the understanding of where you need to be, and I'll tell you, the hardest thing to rework is a poor jumping position, because the moment of the jump is such a short moment in time that I can do in a 4-day clinic. I can get everybody's position. We worked on the flat, we worked over poles, we worked over cross rail. And the minute they see it as a jump, I lose them. Because the
muscle memory and
it's so rapid. So, you know, it's like, okay, now I've got you up to an 18-inch cross rail, and you need to live here for about 6 months. Until you rework that in your brain, and then we can build, because otherwise you see jump and the brain is reacting so rapidly to the position that has been established through poor instruction, in my opinion, that, you know, it's really hard to rework it, which is why, you know, you're not going to get a big time show jumper coming and having their position taken down, because they have adapted to it and they can survive over the jump. But I have a great student out in Washington State, and she is, if she's 5 foot, I don't even think she is, and she's been a student of mine, and she's in my jumping book, and I just saw a video of her jumping around, and it is so lovely, and she has an automatic release, and her position is so nice, and her horse jumps like a hunter, because a good hunter.
Good.
Over the jumps, because he can jump out of stride. And what do I mean by jumping out of stride? That the horse comes up to the jump and doesn't change rhythm. And what you see nowadays is the horses come up and they have to break rhythm, pass the ground with the front feet, because their withers are dropping down relative to their front legs, so they're not in good weight-bearing posture, and then come up over the jump. And so, you know, why do we have so many problems with these horses? Because they are not jumping in a correct organization with their withers up and their back round. Anyway, okay, you've led me down that garden path.
Yeah, no.
You got to pull me back a little bit.
No, that's great, though. I mean, I'm kind of drawing some lines in my mind of the riders learning poor position and having a challenge and referring back to muscle memory. I'm drawing the line there directly to these horses that learn kind of a poor philosophy about the bit or about the bridle, and how that's so difficult to rework them into proper carriage and balance.
Right, because whatever you learn first, you have to remember that horses have a gigantic cerebellum and a big motor cortex and very little what we call frontal lobe or neocortex. We have a much smaller relative to the horse cerebellum, which is where we store all those motor patterns and muscle memory, if you will, which doesn't exist in the muscles. It exists in the brain.
Right.
But, and we have a motor cortex. So we're motor movement creatures just like the horse, but the horse he can't make up stories.
Right.
So the good news is that, and this is where Surefoot comes in, is that I've seen horses literally in seconds rework motor patterns when you offer them something that brings their attention to what they're doing. With people, it's harder because we have these stories. But I've got to sit up straight. I'm not straight. I don't look right. We have this self-image thing that we keep struggling with. And so we run this repertoire of self-image and how this isn't correct. But if I can get people out of that thinking mode and into the motor movement pattern, we have a chance. I teach them the way I teach horses, with minimal words and a lot of movement. And a lot of challenge to that movement, because the minute you get them trying to analyze, you're stunk. You got to get them out of the analytical mind, which cannot handle movement. I mean, it's like, you don't move in the analytical mind. You move in the motor cortex and the cerebellum and the stored patterns in your brain. So you've got to get people to not try to analyze movement, but just to experience movement and different types of movement, because otherwise there's no way. If you tried to think of everything you needed to do to stand up out of your chair, you'd die there. We'd find you there all moldy.
Yes. Right. Well, it's funny because that's bringing me to a memory that I have of you teaching a clinic in Greensburg when I hosted you down there, and somebody had a question, and I'll be darned if I can remember the question. But your response was awesome. You said, that's just too cerebral. Just go ride.
Because riding is movement, and movement is life. And so, when we stop moving, if you look at old people, what's happening? They're not moving anymore.
Right.
Moving is life. Why do we ride? Because we move. Why do we love horses? They move us. It's all about movement. And so it's real important that if we want to avoid injuries in both the horse and in ourselves, and to really enjoy this process and not have the fear, that so many women have, because the brain knows when you're not stable. The brain sends you that message of fear to say, hey, you know what? Something's not quite right.
Yes.
But then we analyze it and we go, well, I just shouldn't be afraid, or I'm just terrified, but I'm frozen because I've put myself so beyond the pale without the proper information. And so our brain recognizes when we're stable and when we're safe. And what we have to do in riding is be able to experience that place. That's the first thing I teach people, is like, here's where you're solid. Here's your home base. And so they can feel that stability, and then the fear drops away, and then they can actually start to learn to move with their horse.
Yes.
But there's, people as we get older, children just move, right?
Right.
They don't have the brain to analyze. It hasn't developed yet. Literally, they don't have the ability. So that's what's so cool about them, is that when you get like that 11, 12-year-old child, they're all about movement and they're not about analysis. So they've finally got some coordination skills. The brain's developed enough that they can organize. And, that's their perfect moment to ride.
Yeah.
Then we become self-aware and self-insecure. We go through puberty, and then we start to, develop the brain more, and we get very analytical. And, and we have to get back to that 12, 13-year-old concept of learning, where it's, feeling movement and being able to coordinate. We can do it. We can do it, but like.
Okay, so that's going to bring me into the next question. So that's a perfect segue. So you say we can do it. So for our riders that have developed their positions or developed their habits or their, all these challenges, how do they do it? How do they go about becoming more aware, or how do they go about fixing these problems they have?
The first thing is you have to have a choice, right? And that's, if you don't have a choice, you can't let go of what you've got. If you have the last, what's your favorite drink?
What's my favorite drink?
Whiskey sour,
Coffee.
right? Coffee. Oh, that's right. You and I are like that. It's the last cup of coffee on the planet. Are you going to give it up? No. Right? So if you don't have a choice, you can't give it up. So the first thing is to start experiencing some choices in a safe environment. And so it's like doing some exploration, being willing to allow yourself to explore and experiment like that 12 or 13-year-old within reasonable limits. In other words, you don't take the unbroken 2-year-old horse and jump on and go, I'm going to explore. No.
But Wendy said it would work.
Yeah, no, that's not it. But, within reasonable limits, with, exploring different ideas, being willing to try something and look at your horse and let your horse respond to it, rather than always trying to please what someone else has told you you're supposed to do. And that's kind of like, that's such a radical thought in that we can be our own teacher.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm always trying to do, is empower my students to not need me.
Right.
I want my students to have a basis of knowledge and a basis from which they can experiment, to explore and let the horse start to show them what happens, as opposed to I have to get it right. The minute we have the right and wrong concept, there's no exploration. There's no curiosity, because you're too afraid to try something because you might, quote unquote, ruin your horse.
Yeah, right. I hear that all the time from riders. I'm so afraid to mess him up.
Right. And you know what? You're going to, because that's learning. And we want to make small experiments in the beginning so we don't make the really big ones later. It's like, giving the child some responsibility to handle a little pocket knife when they're young, so when they have the big kitchen knife later, they don't cut their finger off.
Right.
It's learning that it's okay to explore a little bit and try some things. But unfortunately, most teaching is fear-based. If you get it wrong, you're going to get yelled at, or if you get it wrong, you're going to mess up your horse, or if you get it wrong, something really catastrophic is going to happen. And also the perceived self-image. Oh, I've got to be, but I have to be this. I have to sit up. I have to have my heels down. It's like, really? You do?
Right.
What happened? What happened? Oh, look, you didn't die. And that's, but I do. That's what I do. Is I come in and I break. I intentionally and purposefully break down these misconceived concepts and the person's, if you will, belief systems, to get them to start being curious and exploring and investigative and trying different things and being childlike in their learning process with their horse. And believe me, the horses get it. They're like, oh, if you make a mistake and your intention was good, they're fine. But, if you intend to harm them, they're going to know the intent is to harm. So, they really perceive the intention, and they're very tolerant, and they're very forgiving of honest mistakes, and so I think that you can't go through life with them in bubble wrap. It's not going to work.
Right. Riders and horses. Yeah.
Riders and horses. And we want to minimize the risks so that we keep the horse and rider as safe as possible, We want to minimize the risk, but at the same time, we have to develop this interaction, this curiosity, and this exploration so that the horse gets to give us feedback, and we use the horse as our mirror, as our feedback, and start exploring and trying new ideas and different things and going, oh, wow, that worked. Oh, that didn't work. I mean, I do it all the time. I do stuff all the time. I go, oh, that didn't work. All right, well, let's try something else,
Right.
And how many trainers? Yeah, every trainer does that. Every single trainer
Absolutely.
does
Well, all
that.
the good ones, yeah.
Yeah, because it's that exploration and just finding out, okay, how does this, does this work? And obviously, we want to minimize the risk to everyone. You have to have a certain amount of good judgment. But this is the other thing I find, and I think we've talked about this before, is I tell people, most of my clients now are adults.
Yes.
And so many of them are doctors or lawyers, or, they've been career moms raising 4 kids, or nurses, or they've had professional jobs. And they've had to make professional job decisions. So they already have the skills to assess and evaluate. Is this a smart thing to do? Is this a dumb thing to do? Can I do a little bit of this? Yeah, I can. Or no, well, not in this environment, not in this situation. But I call it take your adult with you.
Right, okay.
Because so many adult riders are childish with their horses, as opposed to adults enjoying their horses as adults and having that parent, being able to parent themselves in relation to their horse. So what I mean by that is someone who has grown up with horses all their life. You have grown up with horses all your life. I have grown up with horses all my life. I have matured in my behavior and my mannerisms and my life with horses in my life. So my emotional self has matured with horses around me, and I've grown through all those stages. People who were denied the horse as a child and then come to horses later in life are emotionally that child that was at the age at which they were denied, is my opinion.
Okay.
So if you at 12 years old, you wanted a horse and mom and dad said, it's not happening. And for the next 40 years, you have yearned to have a horse, and you finally go to look for your horse. You're a 12-year-old looking for a horse, not a 52-year-old.
Gotcha.
And this is where you need to take your adult with you. You need to take the one that's been the mom raising 4 kids. When you go to look at the horse and you say, would this be appropriate for my 10-year-old? No, I will not buy the unbroken 4-year-old stallion.
Right. And so then this is why we see so much of the time, oh, but he's so beautiful.
Yes, because they're emotionally children.
Yes.
And so, this is where I always say you've got to take your adult with you. And, what is that 52-year-old woman who's not ever ridden and is really finally going to get into riding and have a nice, she needs a, 17-year-old quarter horse that was in a school setting that, has seen everything, done everything, and that's her first horse.
Right. Something capable of teaching her and taking care of her in spite of mistakes.
Right. And who's seen it all and is totally unflappable and totally unfazed. Okay. Yeah. Been there, seen that. I know what that is. I don't have to react to it.
Right.
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 That's what they need. And that's what they would get for their child, hopefully. Right?
Yeah, we would hope, yeah.
Hopefully. But, as an adult who's finally fulfilling their lifelong dream of having a horse, they're still thinking Black Beauty.
Yeah.
They're still thinking of the riding on the beach with the mane flowing and bridleless and in the breeze and running through the water, because they're emotionally children. And that's it's not a bad thing, because you're finally getting to fulfill that childhood desire. You have to take your adult with you to make sure you make wise choices so that you don't jeopardize the 52-year-old in her
right.
Right?
Yeah, that
in
makes
her
so much
desire
sense.
To be 12.
Yeah.
And so this is where, we need that reality check of, oh yeah, I'm 52. I'm just getting into horses. I've had a desk job for the past, 20 years. I'm a little overweight. I'm a bit unfit. I really want to have my horse now. The kids are out of college and they've moved on. And I have the time and I have the income. What they really need is that steady Eddie, going to take care of them horse, not Black Beauty.
Not Black Beauty. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
that's perfect advice. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is where we just have to make those wise decisions of taking our adult with us, and taking an adult with us when, I'll never forget, there was a book that came out quite a few years ago now, and someone asked me to write a review, and the author was telling adult women to take their horse out bareback in the dark to bond with them and ride in the dark.
Oh, my gosh.
And I just, as a professional and a riding instructor, my review was like, this is a great coffee table book, and do not do this. Because you're not that 12-year-old that if you fall off, you're going to be okay, or, what if you,
yeah.
whatever.
There's no bouncing. There's just splattering at that point.
Right. And so this is where, it's taking the adult with us that has matured in this world, that understands our limitations as an adult, and yet we can still fulfill those childhood dreams. And that's what's so important, is that, yes, get a horse. Yes, go learn to ride. Please take care of yourself. Please take your adult with you and hold your child's hand when they start running towards the horse that's snorting like crazy and, was just brought in from the range, and say, let's find one that's more appropriate for you at this stage in your life.
Right.
And then you're actually going to have a good time, and you're not going to be terrified. And so if you explore a little bit and you make a mistake, the horse is going to go, yeah, whatever, I've seen that before. It's okay. And then you really can fulfill your dream, because then you really have that horse that will look after you instead of be terrified by your, lack of experience.
Right. Right. Instead of getting the horse that really at their stage needs you to look after them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have the middle group, which is the rode up until the 20s, got a job, had kids, got married, quit riding for a while, and they come back. And so their needs, they can fall into the other two categories. They can fall into still have the Black Beauty dream, or the matured adult rider, depending on where in the spectrum that they left horses. A lot of women wind up with, the kids went into pony club, they, aged out, they've gone off to college, I've now inherited the horse.
Yes.
But they've been sitting there ringside watching lesson after lesson after lesson. So there's a different maturity, if you will, at that point. They know the horse, they've seen the horse, it's the kid's horse, he's rallied everywhere, he's trailered everywhere, and now I've inherited him. And then there's the sort of more toward the Black Beauty types that they went off to college, and they're thinking that they're 17, and they get on the horse and they've had 4 babies, and now they can't find their center, which what I find invariably is it's not very far away, but it's not where they're looking, because they're looking in that old body for where, that young body, I should say, that 17-year-old body where their center of mass was, and it's shifted a little as you've aged and, had whatever injuries and stuff. But, you show them where that is, and that bingo, they're good. It's amazing.
And those are the riders I find can get so frustrated with themselves because they have the feel of what it used to be, and they struggle to get that, to get that back.
They long for when they could ride on the beach with the wind blowing through their hair and everything was great, and now they're afraid. And so you're right, they struggle with what they knew they could do and what they're doing now. And so that's, again, it's that maturity of saying, okay, it's not the same body it was when I was 17. I've had 3 kids. I had an injury. I had a desk job. But I know that I had certain skills. And also, it's like I didn't have a horse for a period of years. And when I got a horse again, I had gone from traditional medicine to more holistic medicine. And I was completely lost. I had done that for myself, but when it came to the horse, I didn't know what to do anymore, because all of my traditional stuff I'd let go of, but I never kept a horse in a holistic sense, so I had a huge learning curve of, how do I treat this? Oh, it's, the stuff I used to use doesn't, it does exist if you really look, but.
Right.
The old purple stuff you used to put on.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called. And, stuff like that. It's like, well, it doesn't even really exist anymore. It's really not healthy for you, and it was kind of toxic.
Right, exactly. And that might be why you glow in the dark.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the riders having injuries, and that kind of gets in the way, of course. So I'm reminded of, again, I believe it was that same clinic that you taught at my place a few years back. And I tell people this all the time, I love how you start your clinics with your notebook, basically saying, give me every injury you've ever had. And I remember one particular rider, she didn't make it half a lap around the arena, and you went back into your notebook. And you were leafing through, and she had 17 pages of injuries, not literally, but she had all these injuries, and you're looking through, and then you look back up at her, and you said, and I'll leave her name out, but you said, why didn't you tell me about your right shoulder injury? I don't know if you remember that.
I don't, but that doesn't surprise me. I do that often.
So that blew my mind then, and it still blows my mind now, because you didn't say, did you ever have a right shoulder injury? She told you about 27 different injuries that she had, and you specifically pointed out and said, why didn't you tell me about the right shoulder injury? How do you do that?
How do I do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know the answer, but it's still impressive either way, because you were sure. You had no question in your mind if there was one. You knew there was, and she left it out of the equation.
This is the thing that people have said this to me in the past, and it's like, I don't realize what I do.
Yes.
And other people point out to me what I do, but to me, it's like breathing. So when I look at, but I have to caveat this. I see movement.
Yes.
And I see movement, but I don't see things that have been moved. My example, I was in Europe. Brad sent me 3 pictures of the front of my house, from the driveway, from the front lawn, and I think one other. And all I could think of is, why did he send me these pictures of the house? The reason he sent me these pictures is that he moved a 30-foot maple tree from the smack dab in the middle of the front of the house in the lawn to the driveway curve. And I didn't see it. And that's because it didn't move. Because
it was still in the photo?
Moved. Correct.
Okay.
It was moved, so I didn't see it. It did not exist. It just didn't register.
Gotcha.
But if something moved, I perceive movement, and so I perceive lack of movement as well. And that's when I'm working with someone, like in that instance, I can't remember the person individually, but I'm sure that what I perceived was a lack of movement.
That would have been associated with the right shoulder injury and then compensations thereafter.
Yep.
Fascinating.
But if it doesn't move, I don't see it.
Right.
So you get a gigantic tree and, move it in the yard. And I was like, when did Brad send me these pictures? So we all have our gifts.
I love it. So basically, I mean, in that sense, you performed a lameness examination on a rider, right? Like we would on a horse.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. And so I like literally, if I see somebody rise the trot for probably 5 seconds, I pretty much know what I've got. Yeah. I use rising trot as my what's the word for it? That's that. If I see someone do rising trot, for like just a couple strides, I basically know what's going on. And so that's what I use as my, like they can walk and I'll see some things, but the minute they pick up that trot, I know what I got to do.
Gotcha.
And so that's really the movement that I use the most in terms of evaluating somebody. One time somebody told me about this. There was this website, and they had looked at like really talented people, and they were trying to figure out how they did what they did. And so I guess there were these glasses they put on, and this is why it's difficult to teach, because people who are really good at what they do are taking in a variety of data points, and it's not just straight looking. And most people, what happens when they try to see something is they stare at it. And I'll never forget working with Tony Gonzalez, if you remember that name. This goes back a few years. Tony Gonzalez he actually was a farrier who got people to look at saddles, to look up. As a farrier, he recognized you had to look at what was going on above to figure out why this foot was doing what it was doing. And so he actually was very instrumental in bringing the concept of good saddle fit to the forefront, and we're talking 1987.
Okay.
80. Because I went to Australia in it was 87, 88. I'd heard of him before I went to Australia. I went there for a year and came back in November of 88, and I landed in LA and went to a clinic that he did. And he said, it's 8 seconds. If you look at anything for more than 8 seconds, you got to look away. That's basically after 8 seconds, you're not going to see it anyway, because now you're starting to change the way you look at it, probably staring. He didn't actually define it, but he always talked about 8 seconds as your max time to evaluate. And then you can look at it again, but you've got to break after 8 seconds. That's your limit.
Interesting.
Right, because so he actually had a time frame on it, and so if you take that idea and you take this idea of data points, not just one perceived thing, and that's the problem when you go to teach. And actually, I just did we're working on an online course on how to see. So CRK Training and I filmed another course. It's not out yet. We're still doing we're still kind of refining it, but the whole intent of the course is helping people see what I see, because like to me it's like breathing. You just look and it's right there.
Yes.
And I've been doing it for so long, I can't tell you when I developed this eye that I have, but it is teachable. It's totally teachable. You just have to give people data points and clue them in on where to look. And again, it's not staring, but just kind of like gathering a packet of information, and then, glancing at it again, if you will. It's that peripheral vision rather than staring at it. And so what I've done in the course is I've put dots on horses and pointed out things, and we're doing before and afters and slow motions and cool stuff to just break it down and simplify it to help people to start to see. And this is stuff that I've done in my courses, and I'll do this in instructor courses and stuff like that, is start breaking things down and helping people see, because what I like I said, to me, it's like everybody should be able to see what I see. I don't see why they can't.
Right. Because they're looking, but you're actually seeing.
Yeah, and so I don't realize that people so often, people go, well, how do you see that? And this was when we filmed the Surefoot DVD. The biggest problem I had when it came to the editing is making sure people saw what I saw with the horses, so that they realized what was going on.
Right.
And so that was just one of the big things that again, it's like, it's no good if you can't see that the horse is swaying or waving or, licking and chewing or sighing or lowering its head and neck. If you can't see it, you don't know it doesn't exist.
Yeah, right.
There's a story about when the first European boats came to the Americas and met the Indians, and the Indians couldn't see the boats. They'd never seen a boat. They didn't know what a boat was, so they couldn't see it.
Right.
And then, as the story goes, the shaman of the tribe went to the ocean's edge, and what he noticed was the change in the wave pattern of the water. And as he noticed the change in the wave pattern of the water, then he could see the boat. Wow. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a very interesting story because the boat was there all the time. It's that we have to start to see different things that indicate that it's there.
Yeah.
And this is true. My favorite movie, no guess. You want to guess what my favorite movie is?
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, come on. Oh, you might be too young.
Uh-oh. Well, then I'm not even going to take a guess.
It's been around for a very, very long time, okay? My favorite movie is The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, okay.
And the reason The Wizard of Oz is my favorite movie is that Dorothy had the ruby slippers the whole time. Yes. She had to go past the flying monkeys before she believed it.
Yes.
Okay? So she had the power to go home the whole time. We have the power to see. We have the power to change. We have the ability to ride better and do good for our horses. We just have to use it. We have to acknowledge that we have the ability, and then we have to learn how to use it.
Right.
And we all can do this. It's like I don't ever see what I do as all that special. I think that everybody can do this. Right. I think all my students can ride much better and more effectively, and they all do because I believe they can.
Right.
And I believe I can show them how to do that, and that's what I do. And I believe that we all have the ability to see more fine detail. We just need the opportunity to be able to be shown how to see, because it's not what we value in our culture. We don't value the individual's ability to be self-responsible in that way. We value the idea that somebody tells us what to say and we say it back to them in our educational system. And I grew up, I went to public school. It did me a lot of good. But I learned how to learn, and I teach people how to learn, not just riding, but if you want to learn how to do something and I know how to do it, I can break it down and teach you because I know how to teach.
Yes, right.
And I can see what the packets are. You need this. That's where I get back to the scientific stuff. Is you need to see this in these increments. I can't go to letter K unless you have A, B, and C. You can't spell luck without 4 letters. You can't spell trot without 4 more letters. So if I construct an alphabet, a language for you, then you can start to build more complex words and then, multiple syllables and then short sentences, walk and halt, trot. You can start building on that because we have a language and you have the skills and the letters in the alphabet to be able to do it. And that's my job as a teacher. That's what I see as my responsibility, is to make sure that you have all the letters you need and then you know how to form the word.
Fascinating. That makes so much sense. And yet still we see so many riders, like you said, afraid to experiment in that or not able to notice.
Because we need to, it's how we teach, and we've gotten stuck into sort of a quasi-military perspective. You're the student, I'm the instructor, I tell you what to do, you do what I tell you, as opposed to an educational, here are the skills that you need, here's the development of those skills, here's the progression of those skills, this is where you're going to wind up because of the progression. And, so many places, they feel like in order for the students to feel like they're progressing, they have to make them do things that they haven't given them the skills to do, so they terrify them or overface them or yell at them, and yet people still want to ride. And so they'll put up with that, which is sad. They'll put up with that because they value being with the horse so much. That's so important to them.
Yeah.
And so I just think we did come from military, and there's some great value in the military education in terms of the equitation, the position, the rider function, the use of the aids. That's great stuff. But then we have to look at what is the population we're teaching. It's a lot of adults now who, want to have a good time. So we've got to marry the idea of giving them the right skill set with their desire to enjoy the process, because they're not, soldiers, and make it fun. But the thing we have to do the most, Patrick, and I feel so strongly about, is we have to find some way to reintegrate horses and people in communities, and find a way to get the horse, bring back riding stables and bring back places where people can go and experience horses without having to own them, that are safe horses with good instruction. I don't know how it's going to happen in this country, but if we don't do that, if we don't make riding an educational system that's part of our activities in our daily life, we're going to lose horses. Yeah. We're going to lose them at an incredibly rapid rate of speed, and I see it in this country. I don't see that happening in Europe, because I was at Equitana for 9 days. Equitana is in Essen, Germany. It's the biggest horse expo in the world. 250,000 people. 250,000 people came through the doors in 9 days. It was from 10 till 6 every day. The place was packed. There was Kids Day. There were billions of children around. But what the Europeans have done, in my opinion, because I keep thinking about this and I think about what I see happening here, in Europe, they have integrated horses into their communities. So they have much less land mass.
Right.
Like Holland, for instance, is like so tiny. You can drive all the way around Holland in about 3 hours or something crazy. Belgium actually. But they have stables and housing and office buildings all within basically bicycle distance of each other. So the horses and the riding stables, and there's big riding stables and school horses, and kids, that's the activity they do. Instead of play soccer, they go and they ride. They've integrated into the community, and they have riding schools. And in this country now, unless you own a horse, it's really hard to find a place to ride a horse.
Right.
I sort of a little aside. My mom lives with me now, and she's 92, and we just sold her house, and so I moved all of the genealogy and the family photos and everything to my house. And so one of my projects, as if I don't have enough, one of my projects is to scan in all the 35 millimeter slides my dad took.
Oh.
So that I can pass it out to everybody, so they can all have access to digital as opposed to the 35 millimeter slides, which is basically gone away.
Yeah.
And as I've been scanning in these pictures, I found, and I'm going to post it on Thursday, Flashback Thursday, I found this picture of me at a riding school. It was the first riding school. I was 11 years old. My mom took me on Saturdays for lessons, and that's really where I started riding. But I'd been to the hack stable as a kid for my birthday and things like that beforehand. So, we as a family would go to the hack stables for birthday parties or, for Saturday rides, and we could ride a horse.
So it was part of life even before the actual education part of it came into play.
Oh yeah, I had a horse on my first birthday cake, but there was this little riding stable, just down the road, not far, maybe less than 2 miles, and the other one was probably 3 miles away. My dad would take us on a Saturday, and we'd go and ride, and it's like we don't have riding schools for kids to go and ride and learn about horses and be involved, unless it's like the elite. I mean, unless you've got the gazillions of dollars and can have the horse where you walk in and it's all packed up and you get on and you go. Right. Where is the average kid going to go to a riding stable and be able to be around a horse and fall in love?
Right. And with, like you said, the real quality education, because I see riding programs all around the country as far as lesson barns, and so many of them really now are focused on a discipline, focused on if you're not showing, you're not part of their program.
Right. That's what I mean. They're very targeted, as opposed to being like again in Europe, you can go and you go and have your weekly riding lesson, and so that you go and you get on a horse and you ride for your hour lesson. And that's what I did as a kid, is I went for my weekly riding lesson. And so that you bring in people at different levels, financially and otherwise, time commitment and financial. But like, I live in horse country. I live in Northern Virginia, and I don't even know where I could tell somebody to go to just take riding lessons.
Wow.
It's kind of, it's like all the stables I know, they're either private stables or high-end barns, or you have to have your own horse or whatever. But for people to go and be able to take riding lessons, I'm really hard-pressed to be able to name one. Now, granted, I have to say, it's not like I've been looking for that. I don't have children looking for that. But in Europe, I can name several where I've gone to taught, and that's what they do. It's what they do.
Okay. Wow.
So I just think, we have been all over the place tonight.
Right. We have. It's amazing. I love it.
I did not have coffee either before this, okay? I promise you, the last cup of coffee was this morning. I don't drink coffee afternoon. It's a bad idea for me.
Yeah.
But, it's so nice to have the chance to just kind of allow the conversation to go wherever and just kind of, free form.
For sure. For sure.
It's kind of fun. Because
and I knew we would have no shortage of things to talk about. So
no.
we're pretty good at that.
Yeah, we can yak for a while, but I don't know how long have we been talking. I don't even know.
Well, I'm looking at my watch right now, and we've been live for about an hour and 25 minutes. So this is I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for spending the time, investing the time to share with us like this. And I know everybody out there listening is enjoying this as well.
If they're still there.
If they're still there, right? Yeah, we keep getting little thumbs and smiley faces and hearts flying past the screen.
Oh, good. So, I'm not getting that. So
right. So, and actually, maybe if you don't mind, maybe we'll turn to this a little bit because there's been a couple questions posted. Do you mind if I scroll through a couple for you?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, let's see one of them on here. Okay, I'm just going to go to the top. So Deb asks a question, and I guess we'll try to make these answers short because I think we're going to have a bunch of people chiming in, and that's awesome. But I don't want to miss any questions that come in, so we'll try to be kind of short and sweet with our answers. Deb wants to know, what are your thoughts on standard single jointed bits versus linked double jointed? So I'm going to guess she's meaning something like a normal,
like a French link.
French link versus a single jointed bit. So what are your thoughts on that, Deb?
Well, my thought is the horse gets to choose. So I can give you all the opinions I have on all the different bits that exist, and I can tell you all the pros and cons. But in the end, it's that horse that's going to tell you what it most prefers. Because I've seen some horses where I thought, they'd love a French link, and it was too much movement in their mouth.
Yep.
And they wanted actually a straight bar, right? A mullen mount with no joint at all. And other horses, I'm thinking, this bit's going to be great. Spits it out, got to go somewhere else. So, but on the other side, just talking about a single jointed bit, what you have to realize is you have a locking side and a non-locking side. Mm-hmm. And that you can't avoid because of the design of the joint itself. So if you take a single jointed snaffle and you twist one side of the bit, you're going to feel it'll travel smoothly on the link, and the other side it'll jam.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's because of the design. There's no way around it unless you get like a miler with a barrel roll single joint. Mm-hmm. And then we've changed completely because it doesn't have that linkage in the middle.
Right, and the whole function changes at that point. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. But if we're just talking a straight single jointed bit, this is something. And I saw in that picture that I'm going to put up on Thursday, that throwback picture. My teacher his name was Mr. Davies. He was an old Welsh guy, and I didn't realize it till I looked at this picture. How many millions of years later? You know all the chin straps everybody puts under the chin? He took a piece of strap like that and he put it over the horse's nose. And what I realized by doing that is he limited how much the kids could pull on the horse's mouth. In other words, if you took on the snaffle, it would then start to put nose pressure on the horse instead of jaw pressure. Right. And I thought it was brilliant.
Right. Almost more like what do they call those? Combination hackamore kind of ideas. Have you seen those where it's got a bit and a nose piece?
Yeah, but this is actually stabilizing the snaffle over the horse's nose.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. I'll hopefully I'll remember to put the picture up tomorrow. But I was like, wow, this is so smart, because if I do pull on the snaffle, there's going to be some lip pressure, but then it's going to have nose pressure, and then I'm not going to have jaw pressure. And I thought, wow, that guy was brilliant. He really was.
Very forward-thinking there. That's awesome.
How many millions of years later do you discover, you didn't even know what he did?
Right?
Anyway,
it's amazing. It's amazing. Awesome.
Yeah.
And I'll chime in on that as well, in that, it comes down to the experimentation. And something I tell riders all the time is, when the horse tells us what he likes best, who are we to argue,
Yeah.
But,
yeah,
okay.
we have, so I have actually a whole crate of bits. And somebody wanting to know what bit's going to work on their horse, you pull out the crate and you just start going through it.
Yep.
and look in the horse's mouth. I mean, this one horse, when I looked in his mouth, he was curly cueing his tongue. It was amazing.
Yep.
You got to look in there.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Okay. So next question, Renee asks the question. She says, I can start my ride with an aligned position, but it's hard to keep once we are in motion. I'm constantly checking and reorganizing during my ride. Is this normal? It can be frustrating. Does it get any better?
Okay, I have two thoughts on that. One, I just wonder how her saddle's fitting her, because if she keeps finding herself out of position, it may be that her tack keeps moving her out.
Yeah.
And that's just, from just a question like that, it's without a photograph, it's really hard to say, or without some video, it's really hard to say. But if you know where you want to be and you keep struggling to be there as soon as you start to move, then there's two thoughts. One, is the saddle, are you trying to ride around your saddle? Is your saddle influencing you so much that you can't? And two, is there, then I start to think about, well, how much pressure is there on the stirrup? Because that can push us out of position. And people don't realize how much pressure they put on the stirrup, because our nervous system adapts to that pressure and we can't sense it as pressure. It's normal. So, but if she knows where she wants to be and she keeps putting herself there and she can't stay there, then we have to say, well, it's what is going on that's causing that to happen? We have to look a little deeper. We have to ask that question. And that's, I think, what her frustration is, that she doesn't know where to look next. That's where, if she wanted to put up a photograph on my Facebook page, tell her to do that, and I can give her a quick
Awesome, great. So Renee, if you're still listening, Wendy's invited you to do that with the photo. That'd be fantastic, and I hope to catch that if you do that, Renee. That'd be great. So awesome. Well, thank you for that, Wendy. That's fantastic. And so that's okay. So Chris has pushed a question in here, squeaking it in at the last minute. Should we use Surefoot ourselves to find a new balance?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you so much. Yes. Yes. In fact, I'm working on a program, Surefoot for People. I have a great guy who's a personal trainer, and he used to ride as a kid, and he does martial arts. I just spent a couple hours with him yesterday, and we want to develop a whole Surefoot for People program. I already have people standing on the pads that absolutely love them. The medium pad seems to be the one that most people like, although, again, it's, personal preference. And yeah, standing on unstable surfaces is great for us too, because it keeps us adjusting and adapting and developing all those little postural muscles that we need, that are the unsung heroes of good balance. So yes.
Fantastic.
Great question.
Fantastic. Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so we're going to close off the questions for now, and if more come in, Wendy and I are actually chatting about 2 more dates, doing these live broadcasts throughout the rest of this year. So if more questions come in, we'll be able to bring those up in the next broadcasts that we do. So let's see, Wendy, I'm just going to fire off a couple questions at you here.
Somebody just had a great, by the way, suggestion that we have a collaborative horse camp together.
I'm all about it.
Great idea. Yeah.
I am all about that. That would be fantastic. And that kind of goes in line, I think, a little bit with what you and I were talking about over Jenny's ice cream.
Yeah, I think we did Jack about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, if people are asking...
No more Jennies who don't live there anymore.
Right, I know, right? I know. I haven't missed it until this call. I won't lie.
Oh,
this call has got me thinking, man, I could really go for some Jenny's ice cream right now.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, goodness. Okay,
all right, well, and if people want to, I can't seem to post the photo of the highlight bone on your page. I stuck it on my business page and put up a little note.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but I'll put up the title of the book that I talked about.
Oh, fantastic, great. And I'll find a way to share that also from your page to mine here, whether it's in the thread here or whether it's something separate. So, fantastic. Okay, so a couple quick wrap-up questions. If there was one, and I think I know the answers. If there was one specific thing you could tell every rider to focus on as a primary means of improving their horsemanship, what would that one thing be?
Have fun. Have fun.
Oh,
Make it
nice.
fun.
Nice. I love it. Okay, if you could ride with anybody, past or present, who would it be and why?
Oh, this is like the actor studio. Past or present. Oh, I'm going to say Arthur Cuttis.
Nice.
But you know, but I'm going to put a caveat on that. If there was one person I would really like to meet, well, there's 2, past and present. Well, actually, I have met one. But Jean-Saint Paillard, I would love it, although I don't speak French, so hopefully his English would be good enough for me to understand. I would love to have met that man. His book is the only book I have multiply highlighted with different colors and page tabbed, and I just so find his book, like he talks about the term engagement, and he goes to the definition of the term, and anytime the hind leg is moving forward underneath the body is engagement. It's a question of whether it's good engagement or poor engagement, but it's the leg moving forward under the body. And all of his stuff in this book is explained in those simple terms. That is what I'm always trying to do, is simplify it and make it clear and easy to understand. And he does that beautifully in his book. So he would be the guy, if there was somebody that I would really like to meet and sit down and talk with, it would be him.
Fantastic. Very cool. Now, I can't wait to read that book now that you've said that. That's awesome. Yep. That's awesome. Okay.
And, of course, I have Nuno Oliveira. His picture is on my wall. When I sit at my desk, I stare straight ahead at his picture every day.
Oh, nice. Nice.
So, so there's the other one that I would, really have liked to have met. And Dr. Feldenkrais.
Dr. Feldenkrais.
My list is
yeah.
Not a horse person, but
right.
They're, brilliant,
huge
man.
influence, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, great. So, last wrap-up question with this: how do you define horsemanship?
How do I define it? Wow. Okay. I'm going to have to think about that. But maybe this is the way to answer it. I have not ridden my horse. I'm sorry to say, I have ridden my horse once since last November because my schedule has been crazy, and he had 2 abscesses, one after the other in the spring when I could not, when I had time to ride. And tonight I went to my horse because it was finally not 1,000,000 degrees, and because he's a big-bodied horse and he sweats really badly in the heat, and I just can't take an unfit horse and run him around. I think it's unfair to him. So I waited, and today was a nice day. I took my horse out of the field. I brought him in the barn. I groomed him. I tacked him up. I did no groundwork. I got on. I walked my horse down the road. My horse walked perfectly. And so to me, horsemanship is the ability to educate the horse to understand his self-confidence, to be able to do his job efficiently and easily. And it is my job to educate him and to be responsible, and that's really key, to be responsible to his needs, that my equipment is working properly, that he is confident and capable, that I can leave that horse for a year and get on. And when I took him down to the arena and I trotted him a couple of steps because he's like really unfit. But I could say, can you give me a hunches in? Can you give me a shoulder in? And he's like, yes, here you are. Because he knows his job. He understands what I'm asking. He knows his job. And it's like, you know, I mean, literally, no warm up, no groundwork. I just get on my horse.
Fantastic.
And it's not like I asked him to do anything terribly advanced, right?
Right.
But that to me is when I look at somebody's horses, are they, or, you know, we shouldn't have to do a million things just to ride. We should be able to ride.
Right. Exactly. I love it. That's a great definition of horsemanship. Okay, so now, Wendy, we've done a couple videos together. This is our first audio, but you know how I roll. So the question of the day, you get to ask for everybody out there the question of the day this evening.
That about the question of the day. Can you just get on your horse and ride?
There you go. Perfect. I love it. Okay, gang, can you just get on your horse and ride? So, Wendy, we have made this an hour and 40-minute broadcast. I love it. Thank you again so much for joining us. And I want to thank everybody out there who's been tuned in listening as well. Don't forget, gang, please, if you have friends that would be interested in hearing this broadcast, please tag them in the comment section below the broadcast, or feel free to share this with them. Also, don't forget, you can now find this Talking About Horses audio broadcast on iTunes in the Apple Store or whatever that is, however that works.
Cool.
I'm a smartphone guy, but not an iPhone guy, so I can't even access it.
One of these days, you'll catch up with us.
I know. I'll get there one of these days. So, all right, gang, thank you so much. Our next broadcast actually is going to be tomorrow. We're doing 2 nights in a row, back-to-back. Tomorrow, chatting with Craig Johnson on reining, horsemanship, and the state of the industry. So don't forget, tune in tomorrow for that at 8 o'clock. All right. Well, thank you, Wendy. Any closing thoughts?
Thanks, Patrick. This has been a blast.
Oh, this has been so much fun. Hang on just a bit. I'm going to end the broadcast here, and then we'll chat for a couple minutes after. Thanks, gang.
Okay.
Tune in next time.